These are precious human beings with families like anybody else. Our labor movement now is relatively weak, but it is going to get stronger. The Occupy movement is no joke. It is very important. It's raising crucial issues that says if we have the form of capitalism in place that is so gut bucket and so vampire-ish, to use the language of Brother Newt Gingrich, vis-a-vis Brother Romney, then we're in deep trouble. Now, in the end, we have to talk on a global scale in terms of how you transform a narrow version of capitalism into something much more democratic. This Richard Wolff's Democracy at Work is very important in this regard. Even our dear brother Paul Krugman's book on Stop This Depression Now is very important in this regard. But what Tavis and I are calling for is a robust public conversation about this. No one of us have the bullet that somehow could, generate the
Let's see if we've got wisdom from our listeners here. Buffalo, New York. Leo's calling. Leo, you're on.
Hi. I think that you're really striking on some stuff with this issue, and I really think that the history of losing the industrial sector is really the cause for our current problem, and really what we really need to do. And it's not just because of the new poor, the people who used to be middle-class industrial workers are no longer employed that way. Mm-hmm. It's also that the industrial sector employed people who were uneducated and unskilled and paid them wages that allowed them to realize the American dream of educating their children out of poverty forever and owning a home.
Mm-hmm. That worked, but now those people are doing those jobs in China.
Yes, and the trade policies put in place by Lyndon Johnson, in particular with the steel industry, which destroyed, his trade decision not to put penalties on countries that were subsidizing their steel so heavily that they could dump it on our market at less than their own production cost, destroyed our steel industry and made it so that tens of thousands of unionized steel workers got put out of work.
No, Leo, you're right on the beam that the Smiley and West are on there. On the other hand, I mean, they're not charging unfair subsidies right now. They just got lower wages in a bunch of competing countries with us. Let us hold that thought and get one more. Thank you, Leo. Brenda in Aiken, South Carolina. Brenda, you're on.
Hi, Tom and guest.
Hi.
I grew up dirt poor in the Appalachian Mountains. I worked my way through Vanderbilt University and through an MBA at the University of Chicago. Mm-hmm. My security in the middle class should have been assured. But in the early 80s, my health tanked and I lost everything. I am not now technically poor, but I hang by a very thin thread. For these politicians, Santorum, Gingrich, Romney, to congratulate themselves and attribute their success to hard work and prudent decisions without acknowledging the role of just plain luck is ridiculous. For them to not acknowledge that they could have lost their health. They could have had their jobs outsourced.
Yep.
Their company could have gone bankrupt, and they could have. For them not to acknowledge that is either arrogant and blind or arrogant and mean-spirited.
How do we make it work then, Brenda, where we can take into account misfortune, it's going to hit some people, and be able to support people when it hits with enough jobs and everything else for everybody else, so that there's a robust economy to do that. How do we do that, Brenda?
Well, the war on poverty was somewhat flawed, but at least it was well-intentioned. It was an organized effort to provide a safety net. That's what was behind Social Security and Medicare, which the right wing, the Republicans, are working so hard to get rid of now, or to privatize and put the profit motive in.
Yep.
I think we have to get back to that, because the so-called Christian politicians are the worst of all, because if they were really following the teachings of Jesus, they call themselves Christians, but if they followed the teachings of Jesus, Jesus said, "Be ye kind one to another. Blessed are the poor.
Brenda, we got it. Yeah, and you put it powerfully. Tavis, what I hear you and Cornell saying is, in part, I mean, you've got a lot of things that in the manifesto that you want. You want universal health care, and you want quality jobs, and you want homes, and you want less incarceration, and you want food for everybody. But Tavis, at the bottom of it, we're up against some economic challenges here, and I guess what I hear you saying is you want political organization, and Cornell the same, to get people more focused on this, more rallied around it, and if they do, we will somehow, Tavis, come up with a solution?
Three things right quick. Number one, in the tradition of the black church, I want to just say amen to everything the last caller said. She was preaching, and I was saying amen here in the studio.
Don't wait, just say it. That's good.
Yes, amen. The second thing is, Doc says this all the time. We argue this in the text. It's going to take an inside strategy and an outside strategy. We need elected officials of conscience with courage, conviction, and commitment to make poverty a priority. You absolutely need the outside forces, the voices that we're trying to raise, platforms like yours, Tom, the Occupy movement, callers like the ones who've been expressing and telling their stories today. We can't endure a campaign for the White House like we had last time between Obama and McCain, where the word poor or poverty never gets raised. We got to have that in this campaign and push this issue higher on the agenda. Finally, very quickly, we've been talking about the war on poverty, but there's also another war, or plural, wars, that we've been engaged in. Dr. King said famously that war is the enemy of the poor. He was right then, he's right now. You want to solve these problems? Give me back that $1 trillion+ we've wasted in these military
excursions. A lot of
money. I can do something on poverty in America.
I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point. We're talking about American poverty. Let's go to Don in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Don, you're on the air.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I think it's rather ludicrous that so many Americans, those who are employed, are putting their savings into 401ks and 403bs that are investing in companies. We have no say in where that money really goes. That are investing in companies that are multinational, shipping those jobs across the oceans, putting people out of work. So we're putting our savings, or hoping our retirement is hinging on our neighbors losing their jobs. When there are bright people in our own communities, we could be investing in their businesses and keeping those jobs closer to home, and keeping that, because we're owning those businesses close to our home, then I think that those business owners would be much less likely to be doing harm to their home communities.
Keep it close to home, but of course it's hard to do that and get it in big corporations where they're competing internationally and making that kind of money at the same time. But I got it, Don. One more. Nancy in Somerset, Kentucky. Nancy, you're on.
I have 2 points. I think that the corporations, Ford just announced that they're building a $1 billion factory, or how many billions dollar factory in China. I think the U.S. should fine Ford that however much it's spending on those factories, bring that money back into here.
But how are they going to sell cars in China if they don't build factories there? I mean, there's a big market growing there.
You know what? Let's get the jobs here so that people can buy cars here. And let China worry about their... I don't know. I don't know about that. I still say... Okay. Second, if Walmart closes down a store and builds a bigger and better one a block away, then they should be fined for that store for as long as it's left empty, which I'm in a small town. There's a Walmart that's been left empty for years.
Wow.
Second of all, I'm 64. I cannot get Medicare until I'm 65. I need 2 hip replacements. I used to be very industrious. Now I can do nothing. Part of the problem with the safety net is that it's based on inflation, and they are lying about the inflation. I dare anybody to say that inflation is not closer to 20% than to 2%.
Nancy, we got it. You're kind of stuck right there. Cornell West, let me ask you this. A lot of what you're proposing and pushing here with Tavis Smiley depends on this being raised politically. You've been very critical of President Obama for not raising these issues higher, but he looks at who votes. He knows who votes, and people, with higher incomes vote more. So who's going to raise these issues? If it hasn't been Barack Obama, if Mitt Romney says he's not concerned about the very poor, who's going to raise these issues in the center of our political arena?
It's got to be ordinary fellow citizens. When I think of the pain of my dear sister Brenda, and there's a number of Brendas, again, of all colors, and we wrote this book for them, namely to let them know we care, we're concerned. We have deep love and compassion for them, and we will ensure that their plight and their predicament is not rendered invisible, and we can't allow the politicians to be so much at the center of the discourse that they render the Brendas of America invisible. That America will not be able not just to survive, but if America does survive, it will be a mean-spirited America. It will be America that doesn't care. And the fundamental question of this book is, what kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to be cold and callous, or do we want to be compassionate and considerate to the least of these, the weak and the vulnerable, the elderly, and the children, and workers, and people of color, and our gay brothers and lesbian sisters, and Jews, and Arabs, and Muslims? This is the legacy of Martin King we're talking about. This is the legacy of Dorothy Day.
That's a big one, and it's a big problem. Tavis, you talk about a tipping point, a cliff's edge, an edge for the democracy. Where are we in relation to that?
I think we're teetering. We're teetering, and as Doc just said, and I couldn't even come behind that. That was such a brilliant close. The bottom line is this: we're a better nation. We can do better. We have to do better. Our democracy is at stake.
Tavis Smiley and Cornell West have written a new book. It's called The Rich and the Rest of Us, a Poverty Manifesto. And they've been out looking at a lot of poverty around this country, and they've come back to tell us what they've seen and give us a little encouragement to get busy paying attention to a problem that's now right in the center of the nation's life. Tavis, thanks very much for being with us today.
Tom, thank you so much.
Oh, Brother Tom, thank you so very much. What a force for good you are, brother.
Well, always good to have you. Thank you for joining us. And listeners, thanks for your witness and your calls. I'm Tom Ashbrook. This is On Point.